Last week's episode ended on a simple idea that Taiwan can engage the world, but only if it protects the space that allows it to choose its own path. This week, that idea starts to feel heavier because the invitations, they keep coming. More cooperation, more alignment, more expectations. Taiwan isn't just being asked to participate. It's being asked to carry weight, to be dependable, to show up early, to absorb risk, to do more, often faster than societies much larger than itself. And that responsibility is starting to show. It shows up in policy debates that no longer stay technical. It shows up in how infrastructure, energy, defense, and demographics are argued, not just in the legislature, but across society. And it shows up in a growing sense that every major decision now carries geopolitical meaning. Researchers and pollsters have been noting this shift for quite some years. As external pressure rises, internal cohesion in a country usually becomes harder to maintain. Expectations pile up, trade-offs feel sharper, and consensus, which was once Taiwan's quiet strength, becomes more difficult to sustain. This week's stories don't begin with confrontation, they begin with capacity, with the question of what Taiwan has already taken on and whether the systems underneath, communications, energy, people, are being asked to stretch too far, too quickly. Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socio-economic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation. The first story is, like we said, about capacity and about taking on more of it. Taiwan and the Philippines are moving closer, and not just in a symbolic way. Taipei is actively trying to link its Taiwan-Philippines Economic Corridor with Luzon Economic Corridor, backed by the US and Japan, turning what used to be a security concept, the first island chain, into something much more economic and practical. Over the past year, exchanges between the two sides have picked up across agriculture, fisheries, ports, and investment coordination. Foreign Minister Ling Jialong says the goal now is to lock this cooperation into something more permanent, with clear rules and smoother communication for Taiwanese companies operating in the Philippines. And this is what quote-unquote partnering up actually looks like. The Philippines offers something Taiwan doesn't have: scale. With a population of more than 115 million and economic growth hovering around 5 to 6%, it has labor and market depth that Taiwanese firms need as supply chains shift from China. And from Taiwan's perspective, this corridor makes strategic sense. It diversifies risk and lines up nearly with the US and Japanese regional planning, but it also adds pressure because, well, Taiwan would need to think about what it has to offer on this table in order to capitalize on the Philippines' workforce as well as growing market. Now, before Taiwan can keep stepping into larger regional partnerships, it has to confront a set of constraints at home that are becoming harder to ignore. These aren't abstract risks. They're measurable structural pressures that Taiwan's population, for example, has been shrinking for nearly 2 years straight. And the National Development Council project, the working age population will begin declining rapidly after 2028. At the same time, Taiwan's economy is becoming more dependent on uninterrupted data flow and stable electricity. Especially as AI computing expands, nearly 99% of Taiwan's international data traffic also runs through undersea cables, while electricity demand for data centers alone is expected to more than double by 2030. In other words, the foundation of modern growth, people, power, and communications are under strain. And I will tell you why in details, but these are not future problems, they're present ones. And this week's stories show just how Taiwan is beginning to respond. The first is Taiwan's legislature, which moved to toughen penalties for damaging undersea cables and other critical infrastructure, passing the so-called 7 Undersea Cable Law. The revisions raised prison sentences to as much as 7 years and allow authorities to confiscate vessels and equipment used in sabotage, even if ownership is unclear. And before you begin asking, why do we need something like this? Well, over the last, I would say 2 to 3 years, the sabotaging of undersea cables, which are what connects either power or mostly internet communications between an island country like Taiwan to the rest of the world, have increased in numbers. And these are usually done by quote-unquote commercial fishing vessels or likewise work vessels that are flying a different flag. And we may take a guess where most of these ships are operating for. In any case, lawmakers from both major parties said the amendments were necessary to close legal gaps and give frontline agencies clearer authority to act. Beyond national security, officials stress that cables are essential to everyday life, carrying communications, financial transactions, and data flows that underpin Taiwan's economy. And this is Taiwan recognizing that communication infrastructure is no longer a background issue. It's a very front one. About 99% of Taiwan's international internet traffic depends on undersea cables, according to industry estimates. Any disruption doesn't just affect the military. It hits banks, factories, hospitals, and global supply chains almost instantly. Europe's experience with suspected cable sabotage over the past 2 years has made the risks impossible to dismiss. And for Taiwan, the stakes are even higher because redundancy options are limited. That is, by the way, when the same internet connections are connected through different undersea cables. So if one of them gets cut, then the entire operation, let's say, of a financial institution doesn't become completely disabled. Satellites can help, but they cannot fully replace fiber optic capacity. By tightening penalties and clarifying enforcement authorities, Taiwan is signaling that cable protection is as crucial as airspace or ports. If Taiwan wants to remain a reliable partner in regional networks, it first has to ensure its digital lifelines are secure. And now on to our second big problem, which is energy. Taiwan's debate over nuclear power is quietly shifting from ideology to practicality. Business leaders and government officials say restarting the third nuclear power plant as early as 2028 is possible if safety and regulatory conditions are met. The Nuclear Safety Commission has outlined clear requirements, including full inspections and updated safety reviews. Supporters argue that nuclear power must coexist with renewables to meet rising electronic demand, especially as Taiwan scales up to AI infrastructure and advanced manufacturing. These stories will come later. Economic officials have acknowledged that stable, affordable power is becoming a competitiveness issue, not just an environmental one. This number explains why the conversation is changing. Taiwan's electricity demand is projected to grow steadily through the next decade, and AI data centers are among the most energy-intensive facilities in the economy. Globally, a single large AI data center can consume as much power as 100,000 households. Taiwan's new AI supercomputing hubs will only accelerate that trend. Renewables are expanding, but they're intermittent, and energy storage capacity remains limited. Nuclear power currently provides about 8 to 9% of Taiwan's electricity when operational, not dominant, but crucial for baseload stability. Without reliable power, Taiwan's AI ambitions and industrial partnerships become very fragile. Energy security, it turns out, is economic security, and I would argue, national security for Taiwan. Finally, I wouldn't argue it's the biggest, but certainly one of the biggest problems that Taiwan faces is its population decline. The cabinet has approved draft amendments to expand access to assisted reproduction for single women and female same-sex couples, a move welcomed by women's and LGBT advocacy groups, and I would argue by the industries far and wide. And the changes remove long-standing restrictions that limited treatment to heterosexual married couples and allow broader use of previously frozen eggs so that we can hopefully use this as a way to expand our population again. Encourage people who traditionally have been marginalized to also have children. Officials say the reform strengthened reproductive autonomy while also responding to Taiwan's demographic challenges. Safeguards remain in place, including assessments of children's best interest and expanded donor information disclosure. Now, this is social policy doing demographic work. Taiwan's total fertility rate remains below 1.0%, one of the lowest in the world, right next to Japan and South Korea. While the population has been declining by roughly 250 people per day, labor shortages are projected to intensify after 2028, raising dependency ratios and straining public finances. As you can imagine, the workforce is getting smaller, and yet they're the people who pay the most taxes. So expanding assisted reproduction won't reverse these trends overnight. No policy can, but it signals that the government is willing to remove structural barriers that discourage family formation. Countries like Japan and South Korea have learned that the symbolic incentives don't move the needle. Taiwan is trying a more direct approach. Widen access, respect autonomy, and let people decide earlier and more freely. In an aging society, even marginal improvements matter. For all the strains showing up in Taiwan's domestic systems, this is not a story about decline. It's a story about adjustment, even as constraints tighten. Taiwan is making deliberate moves to strengthen its long-term capacity, not just as a manufacturing base, but as a technological and strategic actor.
AI 新时代建设国网云端算力中心正式启用。
With the press of a button, President Lai Ching-te and other officials mark the opening of a new national cloud computing center in the southern city of Tainan. Lai says the goal is to make computing power a basic national resource. The facility is part of the government's 10 big AI projects and is the physical heart of its sovereign AI strategy, a push to keep Taiwan's critical data and AI infrastructure on home soil, ensuring the country doesn't rely entirely on foreign tech giants in the US or in China. And bringing this amount of processing power online is a big step. This center has enough space for 700 server racks and close to 15 megawatts of computing power at full capacity. But it's once you go inside that those numbers really hit you. That noise you hear is a sound of the cloud. Hundreds of servers pushing out hot air, processing AI chatbots, research data, and more. The facility helps balance Taiwan's digital infrastructure, which has been mostly concentrated in the north. By placing critical AI resources in the southern Taiwan Science Park, they're boosting the region's high-tech heart. And they're not alone. Tech giants Foxconn and NVIDIA are launching a massive 100-megawatt AI supercomputer, starting with facilities in nearby Kaohsiung. And experts say all the new computing capacity is helping Taiwan meet its goal of becoming an AI powerhouse. The center will deliver cloud computing power first to the tech companies it's surrounded by, and eventually to the rest of the world through undersea cables, bringing Taiwan one step closer to the government's goal of becoming a key digital gateway in Asia.
Taiwan has unveiled its largest AI supercomputing and cloud computing center to date, located in Tainan Science Park. The new Grid Cloud Center houses the Nano 4 supercomputer, equipped with NVIDIA's latest Blackwell chips, and is a core pillar of the government's 10 new AI infrastructure projects. President Lai Ching-te said the facility marks a turning point in Taiwan's transition from a manufacturing powerhouse to a smart AI-driven nation. I mean, you can make the parts and build the computers all you want, but these computers, well, they are eventually used mostly on AI projects that can accelerate productivity, and Taiwan needs to capitalize on that as well. Beyond raw computing power, the center emphasizes energy efficiency, earthquake resilience, and integration with submarine cable landing stations. So this one connects the whole story. Officials say the Tainan site, along with a future second location, will serve as the computing backbone for southern Taiwan, supporting startups, research institutions, and public-private partnerships across AI applications. This matters because AI isn't just about chips anymore. It's about who can run systems at scale. Globally, access to advanced computing is becoming a bottleneck, with demand for AI compute capacity growing by 30 to 40% annually. According to industry estimates, By investing directly into supercomputing infrastructure, Taiwan is moving up the value chain, from supplying components to enabling applications. The Nano 4 system also signals seriousness about resilience, energy-efficient design, redundancy, and seismic hardening. They're not optional in Taiwan, they're prerequisites. Just as important is geography, right? By anchoring AI capacity in southern Taiwan, the government is trying to rebalance development and reduce single-point vulnerabilities. Now, this doesn't solve every domestic challenge, but it does show that Taiwan is building capacity where future growth will concentrate in data, computing, and ecosystems that extend beyond fabrication of semiconductor chips. So when you put all of this together, the tension isn't really about whether Taiwan is doing enough. In many ways, it's doing more than ever. It's partnering up, it's investing, it's being recognized, it's building the systems that the world now depends on. But there is another question sitting underneath all of that momentum. What happens to a society when so much energy, not literal energy, but effort, goes outward and not enough goes inward? Because outward mobility has a cost. When infrastructure is stretched, when energy debates drag on, when the workforce shrinks faster than it's replenished, strain doesn't stay abstract. It shows up in politics, it shows up in trust, it shows up in real numbers, and it divides the nation. Not because people disagree, but because the margin for error feels smaller. Taiwan's challenge now isn't whether it can keep moving forward. It certainly can. The challenge is whether it can maintain that everyday foundation, livelihood, systems, cohesion that makes forward motion sustainable. The latest report shows that Taiwan's top 10% earn nearly 50% of the income and hold 60% of the wealth. And of course, most of these people are concentrated in the industries that Taiwan seems to burning all of its fuel on. So here is a report from Taiwan Plus News.
This new report shows that Taiwan's wealthiest hold a majority of the country's wealth and almost half of its national income. What accounts for such high inequality?
I think one reason for the high income inequality in Taiwan is because wages are very low. If you compare Taiwan to other countries with a similar GDP per capita, Spain, Slovenia, South Korea, and Japan, their wages are much higher than Taiwan. So the economic progress, the economic fruits in Taiwan, they are not being shared with the workers. And given that the GDP per capita is the same as these other countries, that means that a lot of the income actually goes to the top earners, the executives themselves who own these businesses, as well as to the profits of the company. And this allows the income in Taiwan to be very divided between the bottom and top. The other reason for the high wealth inequality in Taiwan is that when they're rich, they receive a bulk of the income in Taiwan. They can use that money to invest in housing, speculate on housing, also buy stocks and earn from the stocks. And they are able to then use this to generate wealth for themselves, which is why Taiwan's wealth inequality is very high as well.
What does this inequality mean for Taiwan society in the long run?
There are quite a number of research in Europe and America that has shown that high inequality can contribute to political polarization as well as growing social issues in the country. As a whole, there needs to be a conversation as to whether this income and wealth inequality is healthy to Taiwan if it leads to resentment at the bottom for the workers who are not able to earn enough to purchase a house, and who then lead to distrust in the government. And what does this mean for Taiwan's national security going forward? There are surveys that have shown that among neutral and middle ground voters, they are more concerned about economic issues and income inequality as compared to national defense or national security.
The report argues for things like progressive taxation and reforms to global finance as solution to rising inequality. How do you think Taiwan should tackle this issue?
We need to first resolve the highly imbalanced wage structure in Taiwan to ensure that it rebalances itself and is aligned to how other advanced countries actually distribute wages as compared to the economic growth in the country. We need progressive taxation at the top as well. But then if we do not address the low income in Taiwan and the low wages in Taiwan, then no matter how much taxation we are putting on the top, we are not resolving the issue at the bottom.
And there you go. With all that Taiwan is juggling internationally nowadays, soon the people domestically will be asking, is it really worth all the growth, all the partnerships, and all of the development that we are making when we can't take care of our own domestically? Well, we'll continue to explore that here on Beyond the Reefs, produced by Radio Taiwan International. I'm Joey Chow, and I'll see you next week.